I didn't mean to see it. I didn't mean to witness the impossible. But there I was, frozen in the corner of the Carlyle penthouse, tray shaking in my hands as Alexander Carlyle, billionaire, Fiancée's tragic hero, paralyzed in the eyes of the world, moved. Just a twitch at first. A flicker of his finger. Then, impossibly, a shift of his hand across the armrest of his pristine leather chair. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run. My legs refused. My mind screamed betrayal, danger, disbelief. "Lila," he said, voice smooth, low, deliberate, the kind of voice that could slice through steel and leave you trembling. "Come closer." My name on his lips felt like fire. I stepped forward, drawn in by a mix of terror and curiosity, because he wasn't supposed to move. Not at all. Not ever. His fiancée, Veronica, had made the world believe he was helpless, trapped in a wheelchair, dependent and fragile. Her loyal, devoted facade shined in every photo, every gala, every social media post. Everyone believed her story. Except me. "You've seen me," he whispered, leaning back against the sofa, shadows from the city lights painting his perfect features in sharp contrast. "Nobody else has. Nobody can know." I swallowed hard, voice catching. I shouldn't be here." A faint, cruel smirk crossed his face. "You think you should leave. But you won't. Not yet." Something in the way he said it made my chest tighten. Not fear alone. Something deeper. Anticipation. Like standing on the edge of a cliff, heart pounding, knowing the fall is inevitable. And maybe, just maybe, it's worth it. "You've seen the truth," he continued. "And now, I want to see yours." I blinked. "Mine." The words hung in the air like smoke, suffocating and addictive. At that moment I realized, this wasn't just about him. It wasn't just about Veronica. It was about everyone who ever thought they controlled the story. Alexander was testing loyalty, love, obedience. And now I was part of it. I should have run. I should have left. My instincts screamed to escape. But I didn't. Because I had a secret. A dangerous one. And if I played it right, I could destroy everything he had built or be destroyed in the process. Veronica, flawless in public, radiant, devoted, had been living in a bubble of control. She believed his paralysis gave her ultimate leverage. Emotional dominance, moral superiority, the story of herself as the selfless fiancée. She thrived on the world seeing her as heroic. But I knew better. Alexander wasn't helpless. He was terrifyingly aware, calculating, intelligent. Every sigh, every subtle gesture, every tragic glance toward his wheelchair, it was an act. A lie so perfect it fooled the world. And now I was the only one who had seen through it. "You're scared," he said, voice softer, reading my fear like an open book. "Good. Fear is honest. Fear tells the truth." I wanted to deny it, to hide it. But my heartbeat thundered in my ears, and my body betrayed me with every shiver. "Listen to me," he whispered, leaning in, voice dropping to a conspiratorial hush. "You've seen too much. But you can help me. Or destroy me." I froze. Because I realized something terrifying. He wasn't just testing Veronica. He was testing me. He had no rules, no limits, no conscience when it came to discovering loyalty. And now I was trapped in his game. A crash shattered the fragile tension. My tray of champagne slipped from my hands, spilling golden liquid across the polished floor. I jumped back, heart pounding, eyes scanning. The sliding glass doors to the terrace were wide open. A shadow moved, fast, fleeting, gone before I could focus. When I looked back, Alexander was gone. Just a faint smirk lingered like smoke in the air. I realized in that moment, nothing was safe. Not me, not Veronica, not anyone. I took a shaky breath, trying to steady myself, but the truth was inescapable. I had seen Alexander Carlyle alive, moving, manipulating. A man who had fooled the entire world. And now I held the only truth that could unravel it all. Before we go any further, I need you to understand something. If you've ever been betrayed, trapped, or faced a situation that seemed impossible, subscribe and stay with me. Because what happens next will push fear, heartbreak, and courage to the edge. And you don't want to miss a second. Because the story doesn't stop here. Alexander wasn't just testing his fiancée. He was testing humanity itself. Testing loyalty, love, honesty. And I, a maid no one noticed, no one cared about, had just stepped into the storm. The city lights reflected off the shards of broken glass at my feet, glittering like tiny stars mocking me. My hands shook. My chest burned. My mind raced. I realized then, there was no turning back. Because the second truth had revealed itself, everything was about to change. Veronica believed she controlled him. Everyone believed in her version of reality. But I had the key to expose it. And the consequences would be devastating. But could I survive long enough to use it? The answer? I didn't know yet. Stay with me because what happens next will shock you. Make you question every lie, every relationship, and every truth you thought you knew. Hit that subscribe button and brace yourself, because the betrayal, secrets, and showdown are only beginning. And when the next chapter unfolds, you'll see the fiancé, the billionaire, and the maid who holds the fate of them both in her hands, in ways you could never imagine. I wasn't always a maid. Once I had dreams. Big ones. Dreams that stretched past the walls of cramped apartments, past the endless fluorescent lights of convenience stores where I worked, past the constant hum of a city that didn't notice me. I wanted more than survival. I wanted purpose. I wanted respect. I wanted freedom. But life had a way of rewriting dreams. Mine got rewritten in ink I didn't choose. My father left when I was 10, disappearing like smoke, leaving only unpaid bills and my mother's exhaustion in his wake. My mother worked 3 jobs trying to patch together a life for me and my younger brother Jamal. Sometimes I wondered if she'd ever slept. I didn't ask anymore. I just watched, learned, and took on whatever I could to help. By 15 I was delivering groceries, cleaning houses, babysitting, doing anything that brought a few dollars home. I had no time for school events, no time for teenage dramas, no time to breathe. Every day was a grind. Every night a battle against fatigue. I met people who saw me only as invisible. Teachers called me quiet. Neighbors said she's polite. Strangers ignored me completely. The world had learned to skim over me, and I learned to move like a shadow, unseen, unheard, except by those who really looked. And then came the Carlisle mansion. I remember the first day like it was yesterday. The limo arrived at the end of the long driveway. I stepped out of the taxi in my worn sneakers, heart hammering, clutching a uniform that smelled faintly of starch and soap. The front door opened, and I met eyes with Alexander Carlisle's fiancée, Veronica. She was perfect, poised, radiant. Her smile could light up an entire room and make you feel small in the best and worst ways at once. "Lila, isn't it?" she said, voice honey-sweet but sharp beneath the surface. "We'll see if you can handle this job. Don't disappoint me." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. I had faced the world, stared down hardship, endured betrayal and disappointment. Surely I could endure her. Or so I thought. The mansion was a world of extremes. Pristine marble floors, towering ceilings, walls lined with expensive art I could never afford to touch, and rooms that smelled faintly of money, perfume, and secrets. Every day, I learned to move quietly, to anticipate commands, to see without being seen. I became invisible, but in that invisibility, I also observed everything. Every whisper, every glance, every lie. Alexander was strange. He rarely spoke, rarely moved, always in that wheelchair, always the tragic, broken figure the world expected. But I noticed things. Small things. Shadows of a smile in his eyes, the way his fingers twitched when he thought no one was looking, the subtle curl of lips when he watched Veronica praise herself. I filed it away quietly, a secret I didn't dare acknowledge aloud. Life in the mansion was like walking a tightrope over a pit of vipers. Veronica was sharp, controlling, and socially lethal. One wrong word, one misstep, and I risked humiliation, dismissal, even ruin. I watched her manipulate staff, guests, and Alexander with ease, and I learned quickly. In this house, loyalty was currency, truth was dangerous, and anyone invisible could survive longer than anyone else. And yet, I felt a strange pull toward Alexander. Not because of infatuation, not yet, but because I sensed there was more beneath his quiet, still exterior. A truth waiting to be uncovered. Something that could shatter the world Veronica had built around herself. I never imagined I would become part of it. I never imagined that my eyes would catch what no one else could. And I certainly never imagined that by simply seeing, by simply noticing, I would be drawn into a web of lies, power, and betrayal so dangerous it could destroy everyone. Because in this mansion, every smile hid a knife, every laugh masked a secret, and every moment of silence was a warning. I remember the first night I overheard them. Veronica and Alexander, though he seemed motionless, talking in hushed tones. "I know what you're doing," she said, voice trembling slightly with irritation but controlled. "You think I don't notice? You can't fool me forever." He didn't respond, only tilted his head slightly, that faint smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. "You're testing me," she whispered. He finally spoke, soft, deliberate, controlled. "I'm not testing you. I'm observing. Let's see how far you'll go. How much you truly believe you're in control." I froze in the shadows, heart racing. My pulse thundered in my ears. Something cold, thrilling, terrifying coursed through me. This wasn't just a battle between them. This was a war of power, and I was standing on the edge of it, invisible but fully aware. And that's when I realized my life as a maid wasn't just about cleaning or serving. My life had suddenly become the only thing capable of holding the truth. The only thing that could change the course of everything. I wanted to run. I wanted to hide. But something inside me whispered, "This is your chance. You've endured poverty, betrayal, neglect. This is your moment to take control, to see what others cannot." Before we dive deeper, I need you to understand something. If you've ever felt invisible, powerless, or trapped in a world that seems to ignore you, hit subscribe and stay with me, because this story is going to push fear, betrayal, and courage to the limit. You'll see someone like me, someone nobody noticed, rise in a world designed to keep us small, and you don't want to miss it. That first month in the mansion, I learned the rules. Not from Veronica, not from Alexander, but from observing them both. Alexander moved subtly when she wasn't looking, testing limits, seeing how far she would go. Veronica thrived on perception, controlling narratives, ensuring everyone, including Alexander, played her game. And me? I became the silent observer, cataloging lies, storing secrets, watching for cracks in the facade. I started small, cleaning, organizing, delivering meals, listening, watching, learning. Every day I built knowledge, patience, and caution. And then the first betrayal happened. A simple task gone wrong. A spill in the kitchen. Veronica's wrath unleashed on me. A cruel combination of verbal humiliation and calculated intimidation. Alexander, supposedly helpless, didn't intervene. He just watched. And in that silent observation I realized he was letting me feel it, letting me fall, letting me learn something I didn't yet understand. Because in this house, no one helped the powerless. No one rescued the innocent. You either learned to navigate the storm, or you got destroyed. And I wasn't going to be destroyed. Not then. Not now. Not if I could help it. The day it all changed started like any other, with the sun creeping over the skyline, painting the penthouse in pale gold. I moved silently through the corridors, tray in hand, knowing every step mattered. I had learned that even the smallest mistake could be weaponized against you in that house. Veronica was hosting one of her infamous charity galas. Perfect dresses, perfect smiles, perfect facade. The kind of event where billionaires and socialites mingled, drank overpriced wine, and whispered about each other behind polite smiles. Alexander, supposedly paralyzed, sat in the center, a tragic figure the world cooed over. Everyone thought he was helpless, a symbol of vulnerability, and she was the angel keeping him afloat. But I knew better. I had learned to notice things others ignored. A twitch of a finger, a curl of a lip, a glance that betrayed thought where it shouldn't exist. Alexander wasn't paralyzed. Not at all. And I had proof. That proof made me dangerous. And Veronica knew it, or at least I suspected she did. It started small. A whisper here, a glare there. Subtle things meant to intimidate, to remind me that I was nothing more than a servant, invisible and expendable. She never suspected I could see through her perfect world, could see through the lies she had built around Alexander. But that night, she made a move I hadn't anticipated. I was carrying a tray of champagne when she appeared out of nowhere, sharp as a blade in her designer heels. "Careful, Lila," she said sweetly, voice like sugar laced with poison. "We wouldn't want any accidents, would we?" I froze, heart thudding. My pulse betrayed me, but I smiled, obedient, careful. "Yes, ma'am," I whispered. She tilted her head, eyes sharp, calculating. "You know, some people aren't meant to see everything. Some truths are dangerous." My stomach sank. She knew. Somehow she knew. And then it happened. A spilled drink. A misplaced glass. An accident, or so she claimed. I tripped, my hands trembling, and the tray tipped. Champagne exploded across the marble floor, sparkling like tiny betrayals, glass shards glinting dangerously under the chandelier. Gasps filled the room. Veronica's perfect smile slipped for a fraction of a second, replaced by something sharper, colder. Alexander's eyes, they were calm, almost amused, but that smirk tugged at the corner of his lips, a silent acknowledgement that he had seen everything. Veronica's voice cut through the murmurs like a whip. "Lila," she said, sweet but lethal. "How could you be so careless? Do you have any idea what could have happened?" I opened my mouth to explain, to apologize, but the words stuck. I realized then that explanations didn't matter. In that house, truth was irrelevant. Perception was reality, and Veronica controlled perception like a master sculptor. "You will clean this immediately," she said, voice trembling with controlled fury. "And I expect a full apology. Do you understand?" "Yes, ma'am," I whispered, kneeling to pick up the shards. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part came later, when I was called into Alexander's private study. The room was dark, the curtains drawn, city lights painting long shadows on the floor. I expected confrontation, maybe punishment, but instead I found him alone. He leaned back in his chair, that faint smirk curling his lips. "You know, Lila," he said softly, voice calm and deliberate, "she thinks she's in control. She believes she can manipulate everything, everyone. But she doesn't understand how fragile her world really is." I swallowed hard. "Sir," my voice shook. "I didn't mean to." He held up a hand, silencing me. "I know. I didn't expect you to. But now you see. Now you know." His eyes locked onto mine, intense, calculating. "And because you know, your life has changed. Nothing will ever be the same." I realized in that instant. He was testing me. Testing my loyalty, my courage, my discretion. And Veronica. She was about to betray me in ways I could never have anticipated. Because later that night, after the gala ended and the mansion emptied, Veronica came into the staff quarters. She looked different, not the perfect, composed fiancée the world saw, but something sharper, colder. She knew I had seen Alexander move. She had known it for weeks, I realized, and she had been waiting for the perfect moment to strike. "You think you're clever," she said, voice low, venomous. "But in this house, nobody escapes consequences. Not me. Not Alexander. Not you." I felt the walls close in. She had found a way to twist everything against me. Everything. My observations, my silence, my caution, they meant nothing. She had power, perception, influence, and she would use all of it to crush anyone who threatened her story. I wanted to fight. I wanted to scream. But I had learned too well. Survival meant patience, invisibility, and observation. I nodded, careful. "Yes, ma'am," I whispered. And that was when she smiled, a predator's smile, and left me in the dark alone, realizing that in a single day, my life had shifted from careful survival to a dangerous game I hadn't chosen but couldn't escape. I stayed awake that night, heart hammering, mind racing. I knew the truth about Alexander, about Veronica, about the lies that held the mansion together. But knowledge wasn't enough. I needed strategy, patience, timing, because in that house the wrong move could cost you everything. And I wasn't just fighting for my job. I was fighting for survival. Before I continue, I need you to understand. If you've ever felt trapped, powerless, or overlooked, hit that subscribe button and stay with me. This story isn't just about betrayal or billionaires. It's about finding strength when the world tries to keep you small. You'll see someone invisible rise. And you won't want to miss a second. The next days were worse. I was sidelined, given impossible tasks, watched by eyes that judged every move. Veronica's subtle manipulations made it clear. She wanted me broken. Alexander, silent and observing, gave no help. Every spilled drink, every accident, every misstep became ammunition. I realized that this wasn't a random act of cruelty. This was orchestration, a test of endurance, a test of loyalty. And I knew something else. Alexander's secret, the truth I had glimpsed, was now my only weapon. But wielding it came with risks I had yet to measure. Risks that could destroy me, or worse, put me in the path of a fiancée who would do anything to protect her empire of lies. And I had no choice. Because in the game that had just begun, survival meant moving forward. Not back. Not hiding. Forward. And the mansion, with its marble floors and gilded halls, wasn't just a home. It was a battlefield. And I was finally awake. The days after Veronica's confrontation were hellish. Every step I took in the mansion felt like walking through a storm. Every glance felt judged. Every breath measured against invisible rules. The house, once just imposing, now felt like a cage. Walls closing in with polished cruelty. Veronica had made her move with surgical precision. My duties increased tenfold. I was assigned tasks that no one could realistically finish. Responsibilities that exposed me to constant humiliation. Spilled wine, misplaced silverware, or a smudged plate became opportunities for her to assert dominance, to remind me where I truly stood. Alexander watched it all. Silent. Calculating. That faint smirk never left his lips. Sometimes I wanted to scream at him, to demand why he didn't intervene. But I knew the answer. He wanted to see how far I could endure. How far I would survive. I began making mistakes. Fatigue, stress, and constant scrutiny wore me down. The mansion's marble floors reflected my every stumble, every nervous glance, every tremor of my hands. And Veronica pounced. "You are reckless," she said one evening, voice sharp as glass. "Do you even understand the consequences of your carelessness?" I tried to explain, to plead, but the words died in my throat. No explanation mattered. Only perception did. In her eyes, I was incompetent. In Alexander's eyes, I wasn't sure. But the smirk told me something dangerous. He was learning, observing, waiting. Then came the night that broke me. I had been asked to prepare Alexander's study for a private meeting with some investors. It should have been simple. But the mansion had a way of twisting simplicity into peril. A sudden spill of ink, a toppled lamp, a misaligned chair, and Veronica was there, ready to pounce. She cornered me near the library, her perfume sharp, her heels clicking like a death march. "You are utterly useless," she hissed. "Do you have any idea how your failures reflect on all of us?" My chest tightened. My vision blurred. I tried to speak, but the words sounded hollow, weak. "You will not touch anything else tonight," she said, voice low, dangerous. "Go to your room. Think about your mistakes." I stumbled to the staff quarters, collapsing against the cold wall. My hands shook, my body burned with exhaustion. But it was the betrayal that cut the deepest. Alexander had seen everything. He could have stopped it, intervened, prevented my humiliation. But he didn't. Not because he didn't care, but because he wanted me to feel it. To learn. To endure. The next morning, the mansion felt heavier. The sunlight didn't warm, it mocked. I had been broken down, step by step, with subtle cruelty, reminders of my place. And yet, beneath the fear, something started to flicker. Anger. Determination. A refusal to be erased. But that didn't stop the world from striking again. Veronica escalated. She spread rumors among the staff, whispers that questioned my competence, my reliability. I became the target of silent judgment and quiet laughter. I overheard them sometimes, the way others repeated her words, the way she shaped perception with the ease of a sculptor. My isolation grew. My confidence shattered. I began doubting myself. Maybe I wasn't good enough. Maybe I didn't belong here. And yet, the knowledge I held, the truth about Alexander, burned inside me like a hidden flame. It reminded me that I wasn't powerless. That the world's lies could be undone if I played my cards carefully. But for now I was trapped in the storm. Then came the breaking point. I had been asked to prepare a guest room for Veronica's cousin. A task simple in description but impossible in execution due to the timing and her ever-watchful eyes. I rushed, overexerting myself, my hands trembling with fatigue. And when I finally finished, she inspected the room. Every cushion, every towel, every small detail was scrutinized. "This is unacceptable," she said, voice low but filled with venom. "You are incapable. You should not be here. You are nothing." I felt my knees give way. The room spun. The words pierced deeper than any insult ever could. I stumbled backward, barely catching myself on the doorframe. Alexander appeared then, silent like a shadow. I hoped he would intervene. He didn't. Instead, he looked at me, those piercing eyes unwavering, and said only, "Keep going." The words were simple. But they were a test. A challenge. A lesson in endurance. And in that moment I realized I was alone, truly alone. against Veronica's wrath and the impossible standards of the mansion. I left the room trembling, heart hammering. Every step felt heavy, every breath a battle. I locked myself in the staff quarters, collapsing onto the cot, tears spilling unchecked. I had fallen completely, broken, humiliated, exhausted. But deep inside, a small ember of defiance survived. I had seen the truth, Alexander's secret, Veronica's lies. And though I had been crushed, though I had been humiliated, though the world seemed to conspire against me, that ember told me something vital. Knowledge is power. And power wielded carefully can change everything. Before the next chapter begins, I need you to hear this. If you've ever felt crushed, unseen, or betrayed by the world, hit that subscribe button now. You'll want to see how someone invisible, underestimated, and cornered rises against impossible odds. You'll see courage grow from humiliation, strength emerge from despair, and a battle that will leave you breathless. Because what comes next isn't just a fight for survival. It's the beginning of a transformation that will shake the mansion, the fiancé, the billionaire, and me. And I won't stop. Even if it hurts. Even if the world wants me broken. Even if I have to rise from the ashes of betrayal itself. The morning after my breakdown, the mansion felt different. The sunlight was the same pale gold that always filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows, but I saw it differently now. I wasn't a shadow anymore. Not entirely. I had fallen. Humiliated. Broken. Almost invisible. But deep inside something flickered. A small ember of defiance that refused to die. Alexander's secret. The truth about him moving, about the lie Veronica had built her life around, was my only weapon. I couldn't wield it recklessly. I had learned that in the mansion, every action was watched, every misstep could be fatal. Patience was power. Observation was strength. And knowledge was a sword I could sharpen quietly. I started small. I watched Veronica, her every movement, every smile, every whispered conversation. I listened to the staff, their subtle complaints and murmured judgments, cataloging each one. I observed Alexander too, every glance, every twitch, every faint smirk. He was testing me still, I could feel it. But now I understood the game better. I was no longer a pawn. I was a player. The first victory was subtle. A misplaced vase, perfectly accidental, allowed me to avoid one of Veronica's impossible tasks without her noticing. She scowled, suspicious, but couldn't prove anything. And Alexander, he noticed. I saw it in his eyes, that quiet approval, that acknowledgement that I was beginning to survive. Small victories grew. I learned the mansion's hidden paths, the subtle patterns of service, the moments when Veronica's attention wavered. I became faster, quieter, sharper. Every tray delivered flawlessly, every spill avoided. Every whispered lie overheard was a brick in the foundation of my rise. And then came the first major breakthrough. I had discovered Alexander's private journal, a leather-bound book hidden behind a false panel in his study. It contained his thoughts, his plans, his observations of Veronica, and of me. I learned that he had been orchestrating more than just his fiancée's tests. He had been observing everyone in the mansion, including the staff, noting weaknesses, strengths, and loyalty. And most importantly, he had noted me. I see potential in you. One line read, written in precise, confident handwriting. You are stronger than you believe. But strength alone is not enough. Observation, patience, strategy. These will serve you well. I read it over and over, heart pounding. Alexander wasn't just a silent observer. He was a mentor in his own dangerous, enigmatic way. He was showing me how to survive. And maybe even thrive. Veronica noticed the change in me too. I could feel her suspicion, her frustration at my subtle competence. Every glance she shot my way carried the weight of someone realizing a threat. She hadn't won yet. But she was starting to see that I was no longer the fragile, obedient maid she could humiliate at will. And that realization thrilled me. But Alexander's tests weren't over. One evening he called me into his study again. The room was dim, city lights painting long shadows across the polished floor. He was alone, sitting in his chair, eyes sharp and intense. You've endured a lot, he said quietly, almost conversationally. You've been humiliated, tested, pushed to your limits. And yet you are still here. Observing, learning, enduring. That is rare. Most would have broken long ago. I swallowed, heart hammering. I had to survive, I whispered. He nodded. Good. Because survival is the first step. The second is understanding your role. And your role is more important than you realize. I felt a shiver run down my spine. His words were a mixture of threat and encouragement, dangerous and exhilarating all at once. He leaned closer. Soon you will have a choice. A test of loyalty, courage, and judgment. How you handle it will determine not just your future, but the fate of many in this house. I wanted to ask what he meant, but I didn't. I had learned that curiosity, uncontrolled, could be fatal in this place. I simply nodded, swallowing the tight knot in my chest. And that's when the subtle shift began. I started using my knowledge strategically. Small manipulations carefully timed. A gentle suggestion here. An unnoticed correction there. Slowly, imperceptibly, I gained influence, not authority, not power, but leverage. Veronica's control over the staff and the mansion began to fray at the edges, tiny cracks forming where my careful actions and observations had made a difference. The staff began to notice, though they didn't understand why. Tasks became more efficient. Mistakes reduced. Rumors that had spread about me began to lose weight as I subtly countered them with competence and discretion. And Alexander, he watched it all. I could feel his approval in the faintest of smirks, the tiniest raise of an eyebrow. He was still testing me, still observing, but the tide was turning. I was no longer just surviving. I was starting to rise. But with progress came risk. Veronica's suspicion grew. One evening I caught her staring at me in the mirror, lips tight, eyes sharp. Something is changing, she whispered to herself. She knows more than she should. I smiled inwardly. Let her think that. Let her fear it. Because fear is a weapon too, and I was learning to wield it quietly. Before the next steps of my rise unfold, I need you to remember. If you've ever felt small, powerless, or overlooked, hit that subscribe button and stay with me. This story isn't just about a mansion, a billionaire, or a manipulative fiancé. It's about the fire that can burn inside someone the world expects to fail. The spark that turns despair into strategy, and the courage it takes to rise when everything is stacked against you. Because what comes next is where the real battle begins. And I'm ready. The mansion had changed. Or maybe I had. Every step I took now was deliberate. Every glance calculated. Veronica's eyes followed me, sharp, suspicious, but I no longer trembled under her gaze. I moved like someone who belonged. Not a shadow, not an invisible observer, but someone dangerous in her silence. The first twist came unexpectedly. Alexander summoned me to the library late one evening. The city outside glittered with 1,000 lights, oblivious to the storms brewing inside the mansion. He sat in his chair, motionless in appearance, but the intensity in his eyes told me otherwise. You're ready for the next test, he said softly, voice low, deliberate. It's not about tasks or chores this time. It's about judgment, courage, and trust. I felt my pulse quicken. What do you mean, sir? He leaned forward slightly, smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. Veronica is planning something. Something that could ruin you if you don't act. She doesn't know you're prepared. But you can turn it against her. A chill ran down my spine. She had been watching me, scheming, manipulating, but Alexander had been watching her too. I realized then that every move I'd made, every quiet observation, every subtle success, had been part of a larger design I hadn't fully understood. And you want me to do what? I asked, voice barely above a whisper. He handed me a folder, thick with papers, notes, and photographs. This is her plan. Every lie, every manipulation, every betrayal. If you act carefully, you can expose her. Not recklessly, not publicly, but in a way she won't see coming. You'll need to be patient, precise, merciless when necessary. I held the folder like a lifeline, heart hammering. The power in my hands was intoxicating, but so was the danger. One wrong move and Veronica's wrath would crush me completely. And that's when the first twist hit me. Among the documents, I discovered something no one had expected. Veronica had been manipulating not just me, not just Alexander, but the investors, the staff, and even members of her own family. She had built a web of deceit so intricate, it was hard to believe anyone could unravel it. But it was there in black and white waiting for me. And the most dangerous revelation? She had underestimated me. I spent days studying the folder, memorizing every detail, every lie, every subtle manipulation. I watched her carefully, noting her reactions, her moods, the way she handled Alexander, the staff, and even me. Every glance became a clue, every gesture a hint. I was no longer the powerless maid. I was a strategist, armed with knowledge, patience, and a burning desire to survive, and to reclaim my dignity. But Alexander wasn't done testing me. One night he called me to the terrace. The wind whipped around us, tugging at my hair and the edges of my uniform. The city stretched endlessly below, lights flickering like a million tiny secrets. "Do you understand what you're about to do?" he asked. His voice was calm, but the intensity behind it made my stomach twist. "I think so," I whispered. He studied me, eyes sharp, piercing. "You've learned patience. You've learned observation. But courage is different. Courage is when everything could go wrong and you act anyway. Are you ready for that?" I swallowed hard, chest tight. "I have to be," I said. He nodded once, almost imperceptibly, then turned and left me standing in the wind, heart hammering. The weight of the coming confrontation pressed on me like the storm around us. I realized then that my rise wasn't just about strategy, it was about bravery, about stepping into danger I could feel but could not yet fully see. The next day, subtle moves became decisive. I quietly shared selective information with the staff, exposing small lies Veronica had planted among them. Rumors shifted, alliances subtly changed, and the mansion began to feel different. The tension in Veronica's gaze was noticeable, the sharp edge in her voice a warning. "And Alexander?" He watched from the shadows, approving quietly. Every step I took, every careful move, he observed and evaluated. Then came the second twist, the one that nearly shattered me. I discovered Veronica had a secret of her own. Something she had hidden from Alexander. Something that, if revealed, could topple her carefully constructed image of control. But this secret was dangerous, explosive, and it required timing, courage, and precision to expose. I realized in that moment, I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was holding the key to a reckoning. But to wield it, I needed more than courage. I needed trust. And trust in Alexander, who had orchestrated so much from behind his mask of helplessness, and trust in myself, to act when every instinct told me danger lurked in every corner. Before we continue, I need you to understand something. If you've ever felt underestimated, overlooked, or trapped by a world that wasn't fair, hit that subscribe button now. You're going to want to see how someone invisible can rise, how courage emerges from despair, and how a single act can unravel a web of lies. Because what comes next will change everything. I spent the following days preparing, memorizing, observing, planning. Timing became everything. A misplaced word, an unguarded glance, a single slip could ruin everything. But patience was my ally, and observation my shield. Veronica grew restless. Her control over the mansion was slipping. Subtle but undeniable. Staff whispered, mistakes were noticed, and the careful facade she had built around Alexander and herself began to fracture. And the most exhilarating part? Alexander knew. He had seen the entire process, testing me, guiding me, allowing me to learn the art of precision, timing, and courage. The bond we formed, silent, enigmatic, dangerous, was our secret. But danger lurked closer than I realized. Veronica's next move was coming, and it was designed to crush anyone standing in her way. I could feel it in the tension of her smile, the cold edge in her tone, the subtle tightening of her grip over everything she controlled. And I knew that the moment of confrontation, the one I had been preparing for, was fast approaching. I had risen from humiliation. I had survived manipulation. And I was ready to strike. But nothing could have prepared me for the full impact of Veronica's betrayal, or the explosive showdown that was coming. The night had fallen like a velvet curtain over the Carlisle mansion, heavy and suffocating. Every light inside the sprawling estate burned with tension, every shadow hiding secrets, whispers, and waiting betrayals. I stood in the library, heart hammering, folder of Veronica's lies clutched tightly in my hands. The moment of reckoning was here. My pulse raced, not with fear but with determination. Every step, every choice had led to this. Every humiliation, every sleepless night, every small victory. It had all built to this moment. Veronica appeared, gliding into the room, poised and radiant, but her eyes betrayed suspicion. The mask she had worn for so long, The mask of control, perfection, and dominance was slipping, and I was ready to tear it down. "I see you've been busy," she said, voice smooth, deceptively calm. "I've been observant," I replied, voice steady, controlled. "And I've learned a lot." Her smile sharpened, a predatory curve. "Oh? Do tell." I held up the folder. "I know your lies, Veronica. I know how you've manipulated everyone, the staff, Alexander, even your precious investors. And I know your secret." Her eyes flickered, rapid, dangerous. "What are you talking about?" I opened the folder, letting the papers spill across the polished desk. Photographs, emails, notes, all carefully documented evidence of her deceit. Every manipulation, every betrayal, every subtle attempt to humiliate me. "You underestimated me," I said, voice rising with controlled fury. "You thought I was invisible, weak, nothing. But I've learned. I've observed. And now the truth is out." Veronica's face paled, but her instincts didn't fail her. She lunged, attempting to snatch the folder. But I was faster, anticipating her move. She froze for a fraction of a second, and that was enough. Alexander appeared then, stepping into the room with deliberate calm. He had been watching, as always, guiding me, testing me, ensuring I was ready. His presence alone shifted the room's energy. Commanding, powerful, yet impossible to read. "You've played your games long enough," he said, voice low, deliberate. "But games end tonight." Veronica's eyes darted between us, calculating, realizing too late that the tables had turned. "You think you can destroy me?" she hissed, fury igniting. "You have no idea what I'm capable of." I smiled, the ember of confidence roaring into flame. "I know exactly what you're capable of. But you miscalculated one thing. You didn't account for truth, courage, or patience. And you didn't account for me." Her hands trembled, and in that instant, I revealed the final piece of evidence. A recording she hadn't expected me to find. A confession of her manipulations and lies, hidden in Alexander's private study. The proof was undeniable. Every word, every plan, every calculated betrayal laid bare. Alexander's smirk appeared, faint but approving. "I never doubted you," he said softly. "You've learned well." Veronica's world collapsed in an instant. The room, once her domain, now felt like a cage closing in. She had no allies here. Her control shattered. Her manipulations exposed. And for the first time she was powerless. "You," she whispered, voice breaking. "You tricked me. You." "I observed," I interrupted, voice steady. "I endured. I waited. And now, the truth is mine to reveal." The mansion felt alive with tension, the walls echoing our confrontation. Every shadow, every reflection of light, every creaking floorboard heightened the drama. It was as if the house itself was watching, waiting for the moment of truth. And then Veronica made one final desperate move. She lunged at Alexander, attempting to regain control, but he moved with impossible speed. Not paralyzed, not helpless, alive, powerful, precise. He caught her wrist, stopping her mid-attack, and the truth shattered her entirely. "You believed my paralysis made me weak," he said, voice calm but commanding. "But I was always aware, always in control. And now the truth stands between us. Your lies can no longer shield you." Veronica's knees buckled. The mask of power she had worn so flawlessly for years crumbled. She looked at me, a mixture of fear, rage, and disbelief etched on her face. "You," she whispered, trembling. "You were just a maid." "I was always more," I said, voice firm. "And tonight you see it." Silence filled the room. The tension was suffocating, electric. Every breath, every heartbeat, every glance carried the weight of revelation and justice. Alexander stepped aside, letting me hold the victory. This wasn't just my triumph over Veronica. It was a testament to endurance, courage, and strategy. Every insult, every humiliation, every test had led to this moment. And I stood taller than ever, visible, powerful, and unshakable. Before we move to the emotional resolution, I need you to understand this. If you've ever been underestimated, overlooked, or humiliated, hit that subscribe button now. Watch how the underdog rises, how patience and courage transform the powerless into the unstoppable. You won't want to miss the final moments. Veronica slumped to the floor, defeated. Alexander watched, silent and commanding, his eyes acknowledging the bond that had formed through struggle, trust, and strategy. "You survived," he said quietly, finally smiling. "And in doing so, you changed everything." I looked at him, at the mansion, at the chaos of exposed secrets, and realized the truth. This wasn't just about revenge or victory. It was about justice, about endurance, about becoming someone no one could ignore. The mansion, once oppressive and suffocating, now felt alive with possibility. The staff looked at me differently, respect replacing suspicion. And Veronica, she had no place here anymore. I had risen. Not just as a maid, not just as someone who endured, but as someone powerful, perceptive, and victorious. And Alexander, the billionaire who had faked weakness to test the fiancé, had been the architect of my ultimate trial, and my ultimate triumph. Together, silently, we had turned the tables. And the mansion would never forget it. The mansion was silent. Not the calm of peace, but the kind of quiet that follows storms, the silence of aftermath, heavy with consequences, truth, and the scent of victory. The chandeliers glimmered faintly, reflecting fragments of the battle that had just unfolded. Veronica was gone. Removed from the mansion, her empire of lies crumbled, her influence extinguished. The staff moved quietly, exchanging glances, whispering of the upheaval, but now respect replaced fear. I felt their acknowledgement in subtle nods, in the way they no longer averted their eyes when I walked past. Alexander appeared beside me, calm as ever, but there was a softness in his gaze I hadn't seen before. "You've done more than survive," he said. "You've endured, strategized, and conquered. I knew you could. But even I underestimated your resolve." I laughed softly, the sound light but heavy with relief. "I didn't know I could either," I admitted. "But the fire inside, it wouldn't let me stop." He smiled faintly, that mysterious, commanding smile that had haunted and guided me throughout my trials. "Fire alone isn't enough," he said. "It needs patience, observation, courage, and you've mastered all of it." I looked around the mansion, the sprawling estate that had been both prison and proving ground. Once it had been suffocating, a symbol of manipulation and control. Now it felt like a testament to endurance, strategy, and the unexpected power of someone who had been invisible. I thought about the long nights, the humiliation, the tests. Every tear, every stumble, every whispered insult had been a brick in the foundation of this moment. I had risen from nothing, from invisibility, from betrayal to this. Alexander's hand brushed lightly against mine. Not in command, but in acknowledgement. No words were needed. We understood each other. Silent allies forged through trials, danger, and revelation. And then came the final reflection, the moment that crystallized everything I had learned. The mansion wasn't just a building. It was a mirror. Every wall reflected secrets, lies, manipulation. Every corridor echoed fear, ambition, and control. But it also reflected resilience, strategy, and courage. I had walked these halls as an invisible servant, as a target of humiliation, as a shadow. Now I walked them as someone no one could ignore. Someone who had survived, who had risen, who had conquered. I looked at Alexander. "What now?" I asked softly. He studied me for a long moment, eyes intense yet calm. "Now we rebuild. We redefine this house. Not just its walls, but its power, its integrity. We decide who stays, who leaves, and who thrives. And you will have a voice here, one no one can silence." A warmth spread through me. A sense of validation I had never known. All the struggles, all the betrayals, all the pain, it had led to this moment. I had a place, a purpose, a power I never imagined. The mansion, once a cage, had become a stage for transformation. And I had risen fully, irrevocably. Before the final moments close, I need you to remember. If you've ever felt powerless, underestimated, or invisible, hit that subscribe button now. Watch this story of endurance, courage, and triumph unfold. Because the lessons are yours too. The fire in the underdog can change everything, if only you dare to rise. I walked through the halls one last time that evening, each step echoing with quiet authority. The staff now looked to me, not for fear, not for obedience, but for guidance, respect, and acknowledgement. The mansion's past of manipulation, lies, and cruelty was behind us. The future? Ours to define. Alexander followed silently, a constant presence, a mentor, a strategist, a silent partner in the trials that had forged me. "You've earned this," he said softly, And you've done it with strength, courage, and intelligence that few possess. I smiled, letting the weight of victory settle into me. I never wanted power, I admitted. I just wanted to survive. And now I realize surviving is the greatest power of all. He nodded, a faint smirk tugging at his lips. And sometimes the ones who appear weakest are the most dangerous. The mansion exhaled with us, its silence no longer oppressive but liberating. Every secret revealed, every lie exposed, every betrayal faced had transformed not just the house but me. As I looked out the grand windows at the city lights stretching endlessly below, I realized I had been invisible once. Forgotten. Humiliated. Powerless. Not anymore. I was seen. I was respected. I was powerful. I had risen from the shadows, endured betrayal, and transformed every trial into triumph. And the mansion would never forget the name Lila. The end was not just an ending, it was a beginning of strength, endurance, strategy, and courage. And in that glow I understood something profound. The underdog doesn't just survive. The underdog rises, changes the game, and leaves a mark that no one can erase. And that's the story.